Well, guys, the one big beautiful bill has been signed, and honestly, for those of us in the 2A space, we do have a lot to talk about here. It seems that the stab in the back is in, and the odious idea of having just a $0 tax stamp is staying in as part of the bill as signed and finalized. Instead of the 2A victory that we really should have gotten, we get this ridiculous non-change that 2A activists were never worried about. It wasn't about the $200 tax stamp, it was about the registration process. Now, I am concerned that we may see attempts to move the tax stamp cost in the opposite direction in the future. The GOP did just prove that they can get away with making it zero, so, at least to my mind, why can't the Dems make it $2,000 or $200,000 or something ridiculous? I feel like Pandora's box has been opened up here, and instead of a win, we've gotten a conditional win. Honestly, as much good as I think that this bill did do overall, it's I'm not happy about this particular revision. It's not the win that we should have had. And honestly, there's a whole bunch of back and forth wrangling and other issues. Fudbusters did discuss this particular video on this particular issue on This Week in Guns, and they have a more level-headed take that I would encourage you to also take a look at, since, Matt's a lawyer. He knows what he's talking about. He's a little bit more familiar with the ins and outs and the politicking of this. But I still can't help be but disappointed that things went this particular direction. I think we could have eked out a win and pushed this through, but I do realize that there was more to it than just this particular issue, and there was a lot of good things that we got out of the one big beautiful bill. It's just sad to see that Second Amendment rights are still a second-class issue for far too many politicians, unfortunately. Now, America. Now, the American Firearms Association is pointing fingers at the gun owners of America for quote unquote letting this happen. You can watch that particular video from them about the 2A backstab or whatever, and in some ways, I can believe some of the claims that are being made, at least in part, and here's my personal logic on this. There is a ton of money to be scooped up out there in lobbying and fighting for something in general. That's just a plain fact. And it doesn't really matter what the cause is, but if you have an entire organization that depends on donations and cash flowing into it to fight that good fight, well, it doesn't exactly behoove that organization at a certain size and level to actually win that fight. And that's some of my concern, that there may have been some backdoor politicking from people who are supposedly on our side. I'm not even sure if this is accurate or correct, but it's at least something that I could see from a rational standpoint, that there is enough money tied up in this lobbying and politicking effort that it's too big to shut down and pull back if a big win like getting rid of the NFA actually got through. I think you would see a lot of that federal level support for all of those lobbying efforts dry up relatively quickly, and I could understand how there might be some perverse incentives there. I don't want to point fingers necessarily and say that's exactly what happened, but I can see at least the logic in it. But it does appear that there is, regardless, now a lawsuit coming from the gun owners of America about the big beautiful bill, and this cautiously optimistic about. Let's take a look at it real quick. Quoting from the Washington Examiner of all places, gun groups plan lawsuits to end National Firearms Act in wake of big beautiful bill. Firearms industry leaders are launching a new legal effort to dismantle what remains of the NFA after President Donald Trump signed legislation Friday that eliminates the excise tax on suppressors and short-barreled firearms. So basically what the logic is here is that because the tax amount is now zero, it amounts to a unconstitutional registration, which the NFA has always been argued as being solely a tax for the registration of that tax stamp, not a registration of the firearms themselves. So I don't know, maybe this is a 4D chess move. Maybe it's a move where we're saying, okay, we're going to get through the least offensive version of what we want in the actual legislative portion of things, and then we're going to immediately turn around, create a lawsuit, and get the rest of the NFA killed that way. Again, not a bad strategy. I could see this working. I just think that we had a better, more straightforward path through actual legislation instead of trying to knock things down via judicial fiat, which I am very skeptical of inherently. I do not necessarily trust the courts to rule on things correctly, and as we've seen, the lower courts and even the Supreme Court is more than happy to play games and create issues and really, really, really not respect the Second Amendment properly. So while I am inherently supportive of the efforts to eliminate the NFA through the use of this lawsuit, I think we had the better path already, and we kind of veered off towards the end of the road, unfortunately. But on the business side of things, as someone who works with FFLs in digital marketing, I do still think that this is something that is going to be a good thing at the end of the day, because removing that $200 tax stamp will still increase the amount of sales for NFA items, suppressors, short-barreled rifles, short-barreled shotguns, that kind of thing in the near future, once this bill actually becomes effective, roughly January 1st of 2026 is my understanding. So, well, it will be a boon and probably not increase sales on the higher end of things. The more lower end of things, where the products are kind of already on that lower end of the price point, and the $200 tax stamp made them a little bit more iffy, maybe, to a lot of people. I think that is potentially something that could increase the number of sales for products on the lower end of things, especially for people who are going to be a little bit more price conscious on those types of things. But time will tell, and I am tracking the overall interest in search terms, various positionings, as well as online social media buzz, to see how much of an influence that things have already had. And I can tell you from looking at some of the different Google trends, there has been a slight but noticeable increase in search traffic and interest around NFA regulated items since this particular act was introduced into the One Big Beautiful Bill. And it seems to be holding relatively steady, at least that small bump in increase in interest. But only time will tell how much that this actually pans out in terms of actual sales and, products being sold to end users. We'll have to see. But I really would like to hear your guys' thoughts on the version of the Short Act and the Hearing Protection Act that we ultimately got in the final version of the One Big Beautiful Bill. Let me know in the comment section below what you guys think, and are you guys just as disappointed as I am? Are you guys at least okay with this partial win? Let me know in the comment section below. Oh, and before we move on to our next topic, one last little thing. If you are a regular shooter, please understand the bill made the tax stamp $0. It did not kill the registration process. So please, 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 don't pester your local gun store with a bunch of stuff about how you don't have to go through the NFA registration process anymore. You still have to do it come January 1st, 2026, but you don't have to pay for it. That's the big change. Anyway, let's move on to our next topic.